This fanfiction is entitled Foreplay by Anxious Goat. This was written for a writing competition on our Patreon Discord where we run all of our writing competitions. And it's very good. I'm very excited to read this to you today. Okay. This is called Foreplay by Anxious Goat. Sirius tilted his chair back on two legs and stared at the ceiling for several seconds before letting the chair come down again with a thud. For God's sake, Sirius! Molly was glaring at him again. Can you find something useful to do? I'm sick of cleaning, he growled. And that's the only useful thing Dumbledore will let me do. She seemed to understand his misery because she sighed and came over, sitting down at the table opposite him, the knife she'd been about to set chopping vegetables still in her hand. I know, she said. Sorry I shouted at you. I'm just worried. Yeah. He stared at the table, then mumbled. I just wish. I know, she said again. Me too. He was sure they didn't mean the same thing, but he appreciated her saying it all the same. Molly was a good sort when they weren't talking about the kids. They both remained silent for a couple minutes until Molly exhaled warily and got up. Better get on. The Order's meeting here tonight, and they're always ravenous. He said. He ought to offer to help, but he hated cooking and wasn't in the mood for doing anything he didn't like. Did Albus tell you that Remus would be back this afternoon? Added Molly, pointing her wand at the knife, which started chopping a heap of onions. Sirius looked up. No! Really? He said in his most casual voice. He ran a hand through his hair and glanced at the clock. Did he say when? It's 3 o'clock already. Soon, I expect. Dumbledore wanted to talk to him before the meeting. Great! Sirius jumped up, and Molly turned back to her chopping with a smile. He peered up the staircase to the hallway, but nobody was there, obviously. He'd have heard if the door had opened. Sirius hoisted himself onto the end table where he could watch the stairs. Remus had been out for an order job for over a fortnight now. Sirius kept imagining what he might be doing. Surveillance, probably. Stealthiness, sneaking, and maybe a little bit of fighting. Well, no. Remus was too level-headed for that. There'd have been a skirmish or two if Sirius had been with him, though. He grinned at the thought. The best part was that since Remus had been doing such a long job, Dumbledore would probably let him have a few days of rest now. Remus was the only person who made this sodding place worthwhile. He ought to think of something to make it really fun this time, apart from the obvious. Sirius considered it his duty to make Remus laugh as often as possible. Poor bloke was much too serious. He pondered for several minutes. Only the sounds of the fire crackling at the other end of the room and Molly's knives steadily chopping away at enough vegetables to feed the entire order. All right, just something amusing for tonight. Oh, he'd got it. He was brilliant. This would be hilarious. As he detected the creaking of the front door, Sirius slid from the table and stationed himself at the bottom of the staircase, wand at the ready. Quiet footsteps crossed the hall. He didn't think Remus had ever wakened his mum, not when he was alone. A moment later, scuffed shoes appeared, peeking their way down the narrow, dingy stairs. Remus was still half a dozen steps from the bottom when Sirius cast a silent, trip jinx. He seemed to catch his foot on something, shrieked, attempted to right himself, missing all the remaining steps, and crashed heavily into Sirius's arms, mouth on mouth. All he could think for the next few moments was that this hurt a lot more than he'd expected. Pain was all very well in its place, but this, with his head spinning from having hit the stone floor and blood running into his mouth and Remus's elbow apparently sunk 6 inches into his rib cage, was not his idea of a good time. Eventually, Remus slid off him and Sirius struggled into a sitting position and spat out some of the blood. "Welcome home," he croaked, wiping his mouth on his sleeves. "Thanks." Remus sounded muffled, and when Sirius turned to look at him, he realized it was because Remus's lip was badly cut and blood was streaming down his chin. He cast about for his wand, but Molly was already there. A wave of her wand and the cut on Remus's lip had closed up. She handed him a tea towel. "Thanks, Molly," said Remus, rather more clearly once the tea towel was scarlet streaked and his face barely bloody at all. "Not to worry, dear," she said, and turned to Sirius. "Are you hurt?" "Nah, all the blood's his," he said. Even his head was barely spinning at all now. "He might have broken a rib or two, though." Molly rolled her eyes, but Remus looked horrified. "Oh, shit, Sirius, I'm sorry. I don't know how I came to trip like that. Are you really hurt?" "It's all right," he said, in his most magnanimous voice. "I don't think they're actually broken, maybe a bit bruised." Remus made a face. "I'm really sorry. I'm not normally that clumsy. Here." He scrambled to his feet and held out a hand to Sirius. Sirius grasped it firmly and pulled, causing Remus to collapse on top of him. Their mouths came together, this time without bloodshed, and Sirius gripped the back of Remus's head and closed his eyes, and this was what he'd been aiming for all along. After a minute, Remus pulled away and got to his feet again. Sirius held up a hand with a beseeching smile on his face, but Remus ignored it. "Sorry, Molly," he said. "You can stop pretending not to have noticed us." "I'm just giving you some space," she returned, plunging a large bunch of herbs into an enormous pot that stood on the stove. Having put the lid on and guided the pot into the oven with her wand, she came over and picked up a chair which had also been the casualty of the fall. "Sorry," said Remus yet again. Sirius giggled to himself. His little trick might not have gone quite to plan, but seeing Remus apologize over and over again for his carelessness was extremely funny. Molly raised her eyebrows. "Stop apologizing, Remus," she said firmly. "It wasn't your fault." "Tripping over my own feet." "I think you'll find that Sirius," she began. "Hey, Remus," said Sirius loudly. "You dropped a bit of parchment when you fell. Look." He gestured at the parchment which lay under the chair Molly had just picked up. The distraction was more effective than he'd anticipated. Remus dived for the parchment, and then, when he realized Molly had already picked it up, went for his wand. But it was too late. Molly was already studying it, and looking rather interested. Remus dropped his wand on the table, sank into a chair, and buried his face in his hands. Sirius, startled and amused, looked from one to the other. Remus was whimpering slightly, and if Sirius knew the signs, would probably make a run for it at any minute. Molly, on the other hand, sat down at the table to study the parchment more closely, and was nodding every now and again. Sirius patted Remus on the shoulder. "What is it?" he said, peering over curiously, but unable to make out any detail. Molly looked up and smiled. "These all look very interesting," she said. Remus let out a little wail. "I particularly like the idea of variant C on the fourth idea, although on the third I wouldn't recommend variant A. We tried something very similar and Arthur's hip hasn't been the same since." "But what is it?" Sirius lunged across the table and snatched the parchment. "Well, you enjoy that," said Molly briskly. "I'm going to go and check Creature hasn't clogged all the toilets again before everybody gets here. See you later." And she departed, leaving a ringing silence behind her. Sirius was staring at the parchment, and his ears felt hot. Remus had fallen silent. The sounds of Molly's footsteps died away above them. Sirius cleared his throat, then cleared it again. "This is very," he began, and cleared his throat once more. "Very imaginative." "Oh, give it here!" Remus grabbed it and leapt up. "I'll burn it!" Sirius also jumped up, blocking his way to the fireplace at the other end of the room. "No!" he said, a little too loudly. "I mean, no. Why don't we, keep it for a bit, at least until I've got it memorized. Although Molly's right about variant A. Apparently it really hurts." "Oh, well," mumbled Remus, his face bright red. "I was only throwing a few ideas out there, using my imagination, making some sketches. Thought it might be fun. Surveillance is really boring, you know." Sirius started to laugh. "It's not funny," said Remus indignantly. "That was really embarrassing. With Molly." He shuddered at the memory, then punched Sirius in the arm as he laughed even harder. "Stop it, Sirius!" "Oh, Remus, don't get your knickers in a twist. She didn't care." He stopped laughing and planted a quick kiss on the side of Remus's face instead. "Come on, it doesn't matter. Everyone knows we're shagging anyway." He grabbed Remus's hand and pulled him towards the door. "I liked the look of the first idea. Variant B. Let's try it." "I'm not sure I'm really in the mood after that," said Remus, though he looked slightly mollified. "Oh, come on," Sirius wheedled. He towed Remus up the stairs to the hallway. "I'll make you a sandwich after." "Steak? With mustard, mayonnaise, and onions." Said Remus, pausing outside the bedroom. "Well, if you make it really rare with a hint of garlic." "Oh, stop it," said Sirius, opening the door. "It'll be perfect. Much like you." "Well, thanks," said Remus. The door closed behind them. The end. Hooray! That is one of my very favorite submissions we've ever had to a writing competition. Very funny, very cute. I love Molly in that story a lot. Gotta have some Wolfstar. We love some Wolfstar. And if you guys are up for it, I'll do a second one. Let's do another one. Yeah? Yes, please. Great. All I needed, this is good. Yeah, another one. Another one. Sorry. I hate myself. I'll never do that again. Ooh. Okay. We're gonna do another story, and I'm very excited about this one. This is a sequel to a story that we read on the podcast. This is called, oh no, where is it? Somebody make a Jeopardy noise. Where did it go? Or we're just gonna pretend that I had this ready. Okay, I had it ready the whole time. Here we are. This is exactly what you think it is. This is Wedding Bells by Sherlockian1895 here in the chat today. This is some squid content. What? Here we go. It's time. It's time for some squid content. Okay. This is called Wedding Bells. It is clearly a sequel to the infamous Squid / Hogwarts story. I would like to read the AN here real quick because I think it's an important part of the story. The AN. I wrote this with my boyfriend when we definitely should have been drunk, but we're not. This is a unofficial sequel to That Fic from Fanatical Fics and Where to Find Them. I'm not a squid biologist, so don't at me. Any squid-related queries should be directed to Colin. And I agree pretty generally with squid biology-related experiences. Okay. This is Wedding Bells. Possibly my favorite squid fic. Here we go. A warm summer breeze rustled the leaves of the large beech tree that sat on the lake's shore. There was a certain something in the July afternoon air. Something that had all the birds singing and all the flowers in full bloom. The lawns around the castle were as lush and green as they could possibly hope to be, and no matter where you looked, everyone was in the cheeriest of moods. Today was certainly a special day. The halls of Hogwarts, normally quiet and empty this time of year, had returned to their school year furor. Bursting at the seams with its occupants hurriedly traveling from the kitchens with large trays levitating above their heads. Despite the commotion, the castle was even more beautiful than usual. Through every corridor and out every window hung sumptuous white fabric. It trailed out onto the grounds and came together, wrapped around the astronomy tower, ending in an elegant bow atop its highest turret. Also atop the tower hung a veil of sheer intricate lace, covering the side of the castle entirely. At the stroke of one, all of Hogwarts froze. It was time. Rubeus Hagrid considered himself lucky to have witnessed many beautiful events in nature. The hatching of baby Norbert, the life of his friend Aragog, and even the first new Thestrals within the herd at Hogwarts. Nothing, however, could compare to the scene in front of him. The merpeople had risen from the lake and had started singing. The Mermish rendition of the classic tune gave him goosebumps. All the Hogwarts staff and even some students suddenly rose from their seats that were gathered near the lake. Albus Dumbledore stood in front of all of them, looking elegant as always in rich purple robes. Suddenly, the surface of the lake stirred, and everyone gasped. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. With a flash, 1, 2, then 3 long pink tendrils placed themselves on the shore, pulling up behind them the body of the giant squid. It was truly a sight to behold. Not only was it extremely rare for the squid to make full-fledged visits to the Hogwarts lake's surface, but it was, in fact, the only time he had ever done so wearing, thanks to Hagrid, a large black bow tie. Tears welled in the corner of Hagrid's eyes. He was surely the luckiest man alive to witness this event. Dumbledore told the crowd to remain standing, as the next guest would be making their appearance shortly. The merpeople's tune suddenly changed, and heads turned swiftly towards the castle in awe. She was truly the most beautiful creature that Hagrid had ever seen. The castle seemed to have noticed all the attention suddenly focused on her, and almost seemed to blush in the midday sun. Nevertheless, at the sight of the squid, she lit up, every window and fireplace aglow. Dumbledore asked the guests to be seated so the ceremony could begin. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the love and union of a very special castle and a very special squid. To some, they might seem a strange pair, but to those of us who knew them intimately, there could be no better match. It is with great pride and deepest pleasure that I welcome you to the wedding of G. Squid and H. Castle." The squid placed its two long feeding tentacles around the astronomy tower, suckers firmly latched to the stone. Oh, I can't. "Now, Squid, do you take Miss Castle to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold until death do you part?" The cephalopod nodded, his beak clicking happily in agreement. "And do you, Hogwarts, take Mr. Squid to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold until death do you part?" The audience took in a collective breath as the castle suddenly lit up in a rainbow of colors pouring from every window. "Well, I think we have the answer then. It is with great joy that I pronounce G. Squid and H. Castle to be husband and wife. Mr. Squid, you may now kiss your bride." The squid released one tentacle, using it to lift the large veil that hung over the astronomy tower. The crowd erupted with glee as the squid placed more tentacles on the castle, embracing it with all its might. Hagrid wept. There was truly nothing more beautiful than love. A passage of time. Percy Weasley entered the prefect's bathroom, eager to take a long, hot bath after a most stressful day. He had to stop Fred and George from blowing up toilets on no less than 3 separate occasions that afternoon. No matter, he thought, as he turned on all the bubble taps. A nice, soothing bath would melt away all his problems. He undressed and entered the swimming pool-sized tub, filled to the brim with bubbles such that he couldn't see the water underneath. He sunk in and closed his eyes, reveling in the warmth of the water upon his skin. A few minutes later, he felt something slide past his leg. Startled, Percy opened his eyes, but there seemed to be nothing there. He closed his eyes once again, entering a half-sleep state until he felt the sensation once more. Was Myrtle up to her tricks again? Percy pushed aside some of the bubbles just to be sure, when no sooner he felt something wrap itself around his leg. He screamed, pulling away, but not pulling out the thing around his leg. But not pulling out of the thing around his leg's grasp. Percy watched in horror as he yanked his leg out of the water. A small, but certainly not tiny, squid firmly attached to him. He grabbed his wand, shooting a stunning spell at the ghastly thing. The spell knocked the squid back into the tub, but in turn revealed that there were more of them swimming about. Percy hightailed it out of there, mortified by what he had just encountered. When he finally reached the Gryffindor common room, out of breath and in denial of what he had just witnessed, he froze. Oliver Wood was standing in the portrait hole, looking at him with a strange glint in his eye. "You all right there, Perce?" Percy couldn't speak. No words could form in his brain to describe the horrors of the bathroom. "I, bad squid." "Never seen you to be at a loss for words." Oliver took a step forward, placing a hand on Percy's shoulder. "Don't mind the new look, though." He winked. He stepped away as Percy looked down, only now noticing that in his haste to leave the squid-infested bathroom, he had left his clothes behind. The end.